Hey Ty,
How's it going?
good. How are you?
Doing good.
Remind me where you live, Ty.
Blackfoot, Idaho.
Okay. Sorry, it's probably like the third time I've asked you that.
Well, you're good.
But I think I do remember that normally you live in Rexburg when school's in session.
Yep. Yeah, I'm normally up there.
Got
So
it. Do you work right now?
I'm not. I'm just doing school right now.
Yeah.
But
Full time load. Good.
yeah.
And what's your emphasis? Do you have one, or is it CIT generic emphasis?
Um, right now it's just CIT. I'm thinking about doing either like networking or cybersecurity. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of aiming towards that area, those areas. So
That's good. Security is really hot right now. Do we offer a security emphasis?
I'm not sure. I don't think we do.
I
I'd have
know
to.
they talked about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of security classes you could take and do your own thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a good idea, I think. Hey everybody. Hey Brother Miller.
Hello. Morning. So, Brother Mudok, what was your role at, is it General Motors?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I uh, I was a contractor, so I got hired through a recruiting company to do a 1 year contract there. And I was kind of a DevOps person.
Okay.
They didn't really have that job title then, but they knew
Mhm.
they needed somebody to do that stuff. And so they hired me to do that stuff, but they didn't give me that title. So
So what would be your advice for someone that wants to go into administration or sysadmin? I know you guys talked about trying to be a generalist, like you have skills in almost every area.
mhm.
What would be your advice for someone that wants to go into that route?
And my advice for someone who's interested to be a system administrator is to learn cloud technology, like how to use cloud VMs and infrastructure and things like that effectively.
Okay.
There's a lot of good certifications available for Amazon Web Services and Azure. Also, if you're interested in getting certified, it's not necessary, but it definitely helps.
Yeah, I'm preparing for my CompTIA Security Plus exam, so I don't know if that
Great.
fits into that.
No, that would be good to have also. That would be great.
Yeah. Mm.
Josh, we're all jealous of your ice cream. You didn't bring some to share.
I know, right?
All right. Sorry. Just enjoying it.
Yeah,
Hey,
I can see that.
Coeur d'Alene's a party. If you ever want to come out, free ice cream. Just saying.
Coeur d'Alene is a party, even without ice cream.
We have all of the things.
It's a beautiful place.
Yep, all the things, including high prices.
Where? Wait, what? Wait.
You guys ready?
I was born ready.
Let's do this. Who wants to pray for us today? Andrew gave me a thumbs up, so I'm gonna have him. I'm gonna take that as a volunteer for prayer. Is that okay, Andrew?
I can do that. Dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this day. We're grateful for this opportunity that we have to learn. We pray that that will open our minds and that will ease our fears of learning about DevOps, and that will help us to be able to acquire the necessary skills that we need for our future careers. We're grateful for the technology that enables us to have class. We humbly seek for these blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Andrew. Ronaldo, I chatted you. I don't know if you saw it on there. I was asking you if you wanted to do a fear fighting thought today. I think you were scheduled for Monday, but I booted you. So
No problem.
Are you ready or not?
I can do it, I
Okay.
guess.
All right. I'd like that. Thank you.
And so I'm talking about it and say, wow, how can I talk about fear? You have fear to talk. And then that was strange for me. It's okay. This is a good opportunity to overcome this question. And then I remember one quote from President Thomas S. Monson when he said, "And faith and doubt cannot exist in the same mind at the same time, for one will dispel the other." And this is completely true, 100% true. Because when I'm trying to do something good, but I have fear, this will impede me or is not good for me to complete this goal. And then I have to all the time pay attention. If, for example, I have fear to talk like this, that is a button here. Wow, it is not a good thing in this question. And then when I have faith to do something and my confidence to do something, the results will be good. And then I'm able to do something and achieve something new. And then another part here that President Monson, in one opportunity that he talked to the BYU Provo, and he used one Shakespeare quote that say, "Our doubts are traitors and make us lose the good we often might win by fearing to attempt." And this is completely true. And then I really believe on this. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Man, thank you, Ronaldo. I appreciated that. There's definitely truth there, and I can identify with that. I've been reading this book right here. Did I show you this? I don't know if I did. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. It's a classic book. It's been around for a long time. It's very, very, very good, very applicable today still. I love it. He talks for a little bit in there how, you mentioned how faith and fear cannot exist at the same time. He talks about that kind of using different words. He says it's actually impossible for you to think of two things at one time. And he says, try it. He says, try to close your eyes, sit back and think about the Statue of Liberty and something else at the same time, like going to the circus or something. I don't know. But you can't do it. It's impossible to think of two things at the same time. And over time, they've found that there were instances that he gave examples over time where a treatment for traumatized soldiers in some of the wars, they found out the most effective treatment was to keep them busy, keep them active, give them something that they could do, so that they were constantly thinking about something, and that helped them from dwelling on their fears and their hard experiences. So staying in gear, kind of is a way to put that, and focusing on accomplishing something in faith will keep you from ruminating in your fears, so to speak, and your doubts. So there's definitely truth to that, and I appreciate that comment. Thank you. Okay, guys, let's get into this. I hope that you guys all looked through those 2 case studies. We put the quiz out there to be prepared for today. So the case studies we're talking about are the first section of chapter 9, and I'm going to share my screen. Basically, the first section of chapter 9 here, all the way up till here, and then the first section of chapter 10. So as I thought about how I wanted to lead this discussion today, I thought I wanted to try something a little bit different. Instead of me asking the questions, I want you guys to take a few minutes right now, look through. Hopefully you're familiar enough with it. You just read it. But I'm going to give you a couple minutes anyway to look through these and come up with a question for the. So let's start with just chapter 9. Let's start with this particular case study that where we talk about M. Campbell Priddy and this Australian telecommunications company. I want you to think of a question to ask the class, and try to not make it a question that's like super closed-ended, like I don't want you to ask something like let's see. What would be an example of not a great question? Like right here. If you said, what percentage of the source code in their development and test environments match what was running in production? This is good to know. Like this is an interesting point of this case study. But then the answer is just going to be 50%. There's not going to be much discussion that's going to come from that. So that's a closed-ended question that isn't going to lead to much discussion. So I'd like you to think of a question that could lead to a little discussion that we can learn from. And it doesn't have to be a long discussion, even if it's just you ask a question and we have one response, but it leads to some thought-provoking exchanges between us. So hopefully everyone will think of a question. Maybe I'll roll the random dice and find a way to pick you out for your question. I wish there was a random generator inside of Zoom. Or maybe I'll just let you guys volunteer. Maybe that would be nice.
Yeah, I can say something.
You got one? Okay.
Yeah. So a question would be, what are some pitfalls of automation, or are there any?
Okay. What do you guys think? Pitfalls of automation, or are there any? Remember what I said on Monday? I found mostly in my career the answer was generally it depends. So usually there's an argument to be made on both sides. So I think that this is a good question.
It's a good interview question, Gunther.
No.
Who wants to try to answer that?
Well, I can answer that. Well,
Thank you.
One of the downfalls, I guess, of the when the systems are automatic, so they kind of they do most of the work without you having to do. And the companies are very efficient that way. So we saw that in Google. That Google is one of the most efficient companies in the world. And one of the major factor is because, you know, they automate like a lot of things. But I think on the other side, when like people do things manually, they have more depth on the how things are done, because like they do it manually, so they know how to do it. So when something breaks, it's more like easy to fix, I guess, because kind of they do it manually and kind of they know the depth of the process.
Okay. I like that answer. Gunther, do you have any thoughts that correspond with Besmir or anyone else? Or what were you thinking, Gunther, with that question?
Well, just trying to look at, I guess, the flip side of it, because these chapters do seem to really emphasize automation, you know, being a key factor in doing the development of a lot of these repetitive tasks. So I was like, you know, well, what are some downsides to it? In my opinion, kind of like Besmir said, there can be some downsides. For example, if you run into something that, like a client wants something specific done, then you probably might have to go in there and configure some of that yourself. Or if you built the automation wrong, for example, and you want to add something new to it, you know, you've got to go out and put that in yourself anyway. So, or you've got to reprogram the automation process itself, you know. So I can see it being useful in like really like repetitive things where, right, you just have to like set up a virtual machine and fill it full of all this stuff. But maybe some companies would be too much on the automation train and say, oh, we've got to automate all this stuff, you know. And then I think maybe you spend a lot of time trying to fix the automation than just trying to do it yourself. I've been in a position like that where I've spent longer trying to fix the tool that was supposed to do it for me than for me to just do it.
Okay. These are some good thoughts, and I think it makes sense, especially when we're thinking about this infrastructure as a service or platform as a service idea, where we're trying to provide maybe a wide scalability for developers to be able to access their own systems or spin up their own systems. And if we've got something wrong in that automated process, or something that we built in or baked into the to that process that's wrong, then obviously we're going to perpetuate that problem with the build. Let's say we set up a server wrong. Let's say we set up a virtual server image, and it's got a security flaw in it, and it wasn't patched, and we thought it was, and we pushed it out to everybody to use as a self-service virtual server to create their test environments. And now we've just perpetuated this problem across many, many environments, right? So that's a possibility. So we end up putting more effort into needing to vet and ensure the quality of those platforms before we make them available as self-service. So it kind of changes your work focus. But just being aware of that is half of the battle, I think. So that was a good question. Anyone else have another question as pertaining to this particular case study? What was maybe the mindset that the company had, how it changed, you know, along those lines, and what they learned? Can we have another question that will help us identify with what happened in this particular case study at the beginning of chapter 9?
I have a question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So in the, are we talking about the Campbell Pretty one?
Yep. Beginning of chapter 9.
Okay, so Campbell Pretty said something that was interesting. We kept fixing forward, but the changes made were not being put back into version control. What did Campbell Pretty mean by that? Like, and is M a woman, I assume?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but.
So what did M mean when she said, we kept fixing forward, but the changes were not being put into version control? That's my question.
Let's break down the question. What were they fixing?
She said, we understood why we encountered so many defects each time we deployed our code into new environments. In each environment, we kept fixing forward. Changes we made were not being put back in version control. So what she was saying sounds like is they'd set up a server manually, and when it wasn't working, they'd go into the environment and tweak it until it was all perfect.
Okay. So I guess we're talking about any errors that we might encounter during our workflow, right? So I'm gonna try not to answer the question here, but I'm gonna try to diagram it a little bit. I think that could potentially help. So let's see how good I am at that. I know the answer is not very good, but I'm gonna try it. So annotations, drawing, here we go. All right, so let's say we've got development over here, and we have many development environments, okay? Because development environments are probably the ones you have the most of in your company. And then we've got, let's say, and this is different depending on, some companies will do this differently. Then let's say we've got some system integration testing or user acceptance testing. Which came first in your organization? For us, it was SIT and then UAT. Sean?
Yes.
What do you think?
Integration testing for us was after UAT.
Okay, so I'll do UAT here. That's user acceptance testing. I'll spell that out. Okay, and then we'll do SIT, which is system integration testing. And then we've got production. Let's just say, for example, okay, so we've got some arrows here, and most likely we have more than one user acceptance testing environment too, as well, okay? But let's say we find, what does this spotlight do? We find a problem right here. Right there. No, let's say not right there. Let's do it. We've got a problem right here. So in our flow, we have a problem right there, and we fix it. We find out we've got an error in system integration testing. Something in our code that was developed in one of these environments that was moved down the flow of our pipeline. We find out it doesn't play with one of the other systems very well, and it causes an error. It causes another system to crash. What are our options at that point? What are our options And when she says we keep fixing forward, what do you think that might mean?
That they never like recorded the problem and fixed it prior. They just fixed it for the production.
Okay. Yeah. So they find out, okay, we've got a problem. This code, for whatever reason, doesn't integrate. It causes the mortgage system to crash. Every time someone tries to pull a credit report online after we've made this change, our mortgage system crashes, and we don't know why. But we can't have that. We need to get it to production as fast as possible. Everybody's anxious to get these credit reports out there in the application. And so we just got to get it done. So let's just fix it here, and then let's fix it, and then let's just move it to production. And since we're fixed now, everybody's happy, and we're happy in those two. Okay. What does that do? If we do that, if we fix it here and then just move it into production and it's fixed, what does that do? What does it not do?
It doesn't explain why the problem even happened.
Good.
I think I'm looking at this now.
It doesn't explain why the problem happened. And what about over here? What do we have over here?
Yeah, it's never saved in development.
Yeah, the problem still exists, right? And so if we're spinning off additional development environments and where it was never fixed, that problem is still going to persist, right? We're going to have that problem in development. And sometimes it's going to pop back up and bite us again. So when she says, now if we read that again, how does that help with what you read, Brother Murdoch? Do you want to?
Yeah, so she just said we kept fixing forward, but the changes we made were not being put back into version control.
So it kind of goes back, I think, to a little bit of what Gunther was saying, that you have to, when you're automating things, you have to manage the most accurate build, right? The most accurate and error-free build as possible, especially if you're automating these dev environments. You don't want to be automating a problem. You don't want to be creating a problem. So often what we hear in industry and also in this book is that the best thing we can do is have our test environments be as close as possible to production.
So there's another path they could have taken to get this fixed that would have been long-term. Does anyone know what it is? Sorry if I cut you off, Brother Miller.
No, you're good.
Go back to the development stage, right? Fix it there and then move it to testing and then move it to production.
Absolutely. So it's a longer path, right? But what happens next time we do a build off of dev?
It's already there.
It's already fixed.
Right. So very good. So instead of this right here, where I showed this path, let's say we've got the red X back here. Instead of fixing it here and going forward, we start back here, and there we fix it. And then we move it forward all the way to each of these spots. And then we've got green checks all the way through. So.
And what is version control? When she says they never put it into version control, what does version control mean? You guys have used it a lot lately. Just a big hint.
It was never tracked as an update to the code. So no one will ever know if it got fixed or not.
That's right.
Going forward.
Okay.
That's right. So Weston, what in our team simulations, what do we use to track code? What system do we use?
Is it good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good job. So what she was saying is ultimately they were not pushing a change to GitHub. and that was their biggest failure.
I'm going to save my fancy drawing here.
That's nice.
Okay.
I think in this chapter we see the phrase, it's easier to rebuild than repair. We see that a lot, and I think that's a good example of that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so good discussion. I appreciate that. So they found out that, and this has happened. This has happened in I think this happens to everybody. It's happened in my career. They found out that one of the problems is that their testing environments did not accurately reflect what was actually, because you perpetuate this problem. If you keep on doing this, imagine like the diagram that I just erased. If you kept doing that, you were using that format every single time you ran into a problem where you were just, okay, let's fix it here, then put it to production. Let's fix it in this environment, put it to production. Over time, your development environments look nothing like production. And so it's a real problem because you're developing your new code on a system, again, that only very slightly looks like what's actually running and what is actually happening in production. Because you've made all these changes in production, but you haven't copied them back over. So our goal here in DevOps is to find a way to be able to always capture those changes and provide the most accurate environment for development in a self-service type way. That's really the goal. And so, again, here, test environments are often so misconfigured or so different from production environments that we end up seeing large production problems despite having performed pre-deployment testing. Even if we're doing testing, our test environments might be wrong. I had an example at the credit union that I worked at where the ATM system that we ran, I was over the database on the ATM system. It was so very different from what was in test because they were keeping a huge amount of transactions, ATM transactions history in production. Just this insane amount. You can imagine just thousands of ATM transactions per minute. And we were keeping this, this long history, this long running history of all these transactions that were happening. And in test, that looked very different because we were being a little bit cheap. We didn't want to have all that storage space in test to mirror exactly the full load of data that we had in production. Sometimes we would test things in test and we would find out when we moved it to production that it wouldn't perform very well because we were dealing with a very different size of data. Instead of the millions and millions and millions of transactions that we had in production, we only had a small subset of that in test, maybe 1 million instead of 500 million records. And so it wasn't a very good apples to apples environment. And so when we would test something, a change in test, and we would move it into production, oftentimes we would see some pretty poor performance. And we finally realized it was not a winning strategy. You need to have your test environments look as much like production as possible. And so the goal becomes in DevOps for the operations engineer to be able to help provide something that looks like production as quickly and easily and as automatically as possible for the developers. And so there are many tools. This is what I asked you guys to think about. There are many tools that can be used in the industry to help do that. Here are some of the tools that help with automated configuration for environments, automated creation. Okay, and what I'd like you guys to do, and I will give you a promise, we will be done by 11. So 14 more minutes of discussion here. But what I would like you to do is pick one of these as your team, or let's see. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. Were you able to see? I'm not sure I was sharing properly there. Was I sharing my the book?
You can see it. Yep.
You could see the book. Okay. Sometimes I click on just the share with the window instead, and I don't know. So inside of, man, I have got way too many windows open. Okay, right here. So this week 7 presentation, here are some examples, and these are taken right from the book. These are some of the tools that allow us to create those environments and make those environments quickly available to developers that look like production, so that when they're doing their development and their testing, it looks as much like production as possible. Okay, these are some, and then there's one down here for chapter 10, automated testing. So we need to get into that in our next 13 minutes here. Anything else you want to, before we move on to chapter 10, Brother Murdoch, anything else you want to make sure we mention for chapter 9?
I guess the only thing, I know that we talk about a lot of terms in this class that are not familiar to you guys. And I don't want you to ever think that you can't stop the class and ask us questions about what we're saying. Because if something we're saying fundamentally doesn't make sense, don't feel like it's because you didn't catch something in an earlier class, or because you shouldn't be speaking up about it. Usually if you have a question, everyone else has it too. So if we're having these kinds of discussions and you just don't get it, and we're asking you a question, you can always turn the tables on us and ask us a different question to help you, because that's our job. So
sure, I agree with that. You know, I honestly, I remember the first few weeks of my career at Payless Shoe Source corporate office, walking in. They had a meeting every morning for change management. And the change management meeting was effectively talking about the different changes, the impacts they might have on the different, so like that diagram that I just showed you, that I had up on my screen, where I had the development to testing to UAT to system integration testing, and then production. This is kind of like the line that you might promote your changes through. They were talking about this stuff every single morning. Every morning I would walk into that meeting and I'd be like, these guys are talking a different language. I couldn't understand anything. Like for weeks, I was just like, it was like going on a mission to a foreign country speaking mission. And, you know, like that beginning, it's like they're talking a different language. I cannot understand it. That's how I felt for weeks. So a lot of those terms that we throw around, this is almost putting you in that situation, in that meeting. But you're going to be much more well prepared than I was walking into those types of meetings. So a lot of these terms, promoting code, going to development, going to the different test environments, going to production, these are the things that they talk about all the time in an organization when they start managing their releases of their different software. So it takes time to understand all the terms, but these are the types of things that are always on the minds of various of IT teams, no matter where you're at. So, okay, chapter 10. Got 10 minutes left. Again, I want to give you some time to start talking. Chapter 10 talks about automated testing. So for Google, this is an awesome case study. Okay. How about this? Instead of you asking the questions, I'll just ask this time. Okay. Tell me what it was Google was facing. Okay. What was the main problem that they were facing? Okay. What did they find out what were the limitations that they had? And what did they kind of decide the problem was? This is a really important case study, because Google obviously is one of the most successful tech companies there is. So seeing what they ran into and how they were able to overcome it is huge. Google would not be the company they are today had they not figured this out. So hopefully you've got this up on your own screen. Tell me what the problem was that Google ran into. This is kind of back in the beginning of the 2000s, or it was the mid 2000s. So, we're talking maybe 15 years ago. Try to think back what was, maybe, I don't know if you can. I guess I'll give you some frame of reference. During that time, Google was kind of transitioning from mostly just a search engine to creating all kinds of cool plugins to their search page, all kinds of cool little applications. So we know Google has all those cool things today inside the search page. It's more than just a search engine. But back then is kind of when they were trying to develop all that stuff, but still keep their search pages performing quickly and not be a bogged down, convoluted experience. So they were kind of bridging this gap between being just a search engine and starting to become what they are today, which is, you know, so much more than just a search engine. So what was the problem? What were their problems that they had?
Seems like they had a... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I think one of the problems was that they were afraid to change the code or to push, new code because they were afraid to break it.
Yeah, this quote right here is amazing, honestly. I think, and I love that it fits in kind of with our fear fighting thoughts. Fear became the mind killer. Fear stopped new teams from changing things because they didn't understand the system. But fear also stopped experienced people from changing things because they understood it all too well. Okay, what were they afraid of, and why were they afraid? Josh, what was the problem?
It looks like they kept breaking each other's code.
Exactly.
They were conflicting.
Exactly. It was so complicated. The system was so complicated that it was so intertwined. Remember, we talked about tightly coupled systems and loosely coupled. Tightly coupled is we make one change over here and it affects 20 other things over here. That's tightly coupled, and it was so this here, as it talks about it right here. Being on the GWS, Google Web Pages team, was not glamorous. It was the dumping ground for all the different teams who created various search functionality, all of whom were developing code independently from each other. They had problems such as builds and tests taking too long, code being put in production without being tested, teams checking in large, infrequent changes that conflicted with other teams. So it sounds like a version control nightmare, right? You guys experienced that a little bit at the beginning of this semester where you guys were stomping on each other's changes. It's good that it's actually really cool that we did that that way, so you can kind of see how it felt. Imagine how it would feel if you were dealing with Google and everything was running through those main pages and every change everyone was making was affecting everybody else. You'd get pretty afraid to make changes because you'd be afraid to break something that all the public would see, right? So what did they do?
So
go ahead.
They made it easy to roll back. That was one of the things that took away their fear. When Aaron McNary, an engineer at Google developer, he said large failures happen occasionally. You'll get a ton of instant messages and engineer knocking on your door. And so they would wanted them to fix it right away because developers can no longer commit code. Consequently, we want to make it very easy to roll back. And I think when you create
right there
way, if you can roll back no matter what mistakes you do, that kind of takes away that fear because you can just roll back and then you're still good. So that kind of gives you more I guess kind of gives you more, it takes away that fear to.
Yes, good. So that's an antidote. An antidote to some of the fear that they had was making it so that, hey, we know we can always roll back. And one of the things was probably making the changes smaller instead of bigger, right? Smaller changes are generally easier to roll back. That's a good quote that you found there. Okay, what else? What else did they do to fix this?
I think automated testing.
Good. So automated testing.
Before passing your code, you will have to go through a lot of tests. And if you pass all the tests, then it will be put in the master inventory. Okay.
So that is exactly right. And that's really the purpose of this chapter. Okay. So a lot of times, here it is. Now at this point in time, they broke down all the possible little tests that they might need to use for all the impacts that a change might have on these web pages, to the point where now today every single change that they run goes through hundreds of thousands of automated little tests to find all the little things that could possibly break. You've got to go through all of these little automated tests. And this is hard to understand a little bit, like what kind of tests are we talking about? If it wasn't for these automated tests, there's no way Google could do 40,000 code commits a day. That's crazy. They're running 75 million test cases a day. And this is old. It's probably more than that by now. I'm sure it's more than that now. Okay? So what are we talking about? What kind of little tests? When we say run automated tests, what things could we be talking about? It's basically any little workflow that you could potentially imagine on a website. That, as I talked about earlier, if we say we're introducing credit scores into an application workflow, we've got to check and test every single possible button that a user might click. And every time they click that button, how does it affect the next system down the road? How does it affect the system after that? And what is the response back? What's the screen back that the person's going to get? All of these, every little possible interaction between the user and all the other systems, we have to come up with some kind of an automated test to do that. So this is a huge portion of the IT industry, is coming up with these tests and writing your own tests as you go. I think Brother Murdoch's probably going to get into that a little bit. More and more, you've got to be able to write your own tests as you write your code to be able to prove that it's working the way it's supposed to work. Go ahead, Brother Murdoch.
Can we give an example? What's something that you guys can think of that if you as a person using the Google website, you would expect it to be able to do every time you go to Google? What's something you would expect it to be able to do?
Well, I think, if you use, for example, Google Maps, mm-hmm. and if they change the feature from like day to night feature or something like that, so they make a change and they push it out, and I think the person that makes the change kind of like has kind of like close to like a real life environment kind of thing. So he doesn't make the change and looks good to him, and then when goes down the road to other people, they kind of notice the problem. But I think, the person that does the changes tests the app and then run automated tests it. And then, he knows that works, and there is very unlikely that the app will have problems because, the app will be tested as well.
Yeah, that's a great example.
I'm going to share something here in the chat. We don't have time to watch it. I wanted to watch at least a couple minutes of it. But the idea here is everything that you can do and interact with on a website, you can potentially code using Selenium or some other, there are other testing tools that you can use. But I like this little Tech with Tim series here that this guy's got. Essentially, this is an example of some Python code that's going to use the Chrome internet browser driver, and then he's actually going to open. You can use code. You guys, you've heard of bots before, right? Like every time you, whenever you try and like buy tickets to something, if it asks you, hey, select all the images that have motorcycles on it or something like that, it's trying to prove that you're a human, okay? Because sometimes people use these bots or these testing tools maliciously in order to perform automatic functions against a website to go out and buy tickets for them or whatever else. You can do these things using these tools, these testing tools, that basically you can write code to manipulate a website. So, for example, he's using some code here that just opens his website called Tech with Tim, that closes the website, or that prints the title of the website. And then he goes into a little...
We can access techwithtim.net, we can quit, but that's as far as we went.
I'm just going to show
So
a
what
minute
I want
of
to show
this.
you now actually is an example on my website. I'll bring it up here. I do have the Selenium documentation for our reference. So on my website, I have a search bar. And what I want to do is access this search bar, search for something, and then actually be able to grab all of the search results and have that in our Python code.
So here's an example of, instead of actually typing into his search bar and pushing enter manually, he's going to write code that's going to identify where that search bar is, put in a search term, and then push enter for him, and actually manipulate those search results and read those search results without him doing it. So in other words, he could run this program separately and not require any intervention from him. You could write a test that potentially identifies a search bar, puts something in it, and goes and proves that it still works, and you never actually have to go type it or click on it or do any of that yourself. So it's interesting if you want to go through this and look at kind of how he demonstrates how to do that. It's actually pretty cool. It's almost kind of magical how you can see you're working on the code on one hand, and then it actually goes out and it manipulates the website for you automatically on the other side. So that's an example of automated testing, and that's Selenium. Again, the name of that is Selenium, which is a great tool. It's also one of the tools that we have here as an option for your presentation this week. So it'd be pretty cool if somebody wanted to pick that as a tool to talk about. Again, you guys are just talking about one of these tools for about 6 minutes, 2 minutes per person. You're going to give us an overview, probably give us some screenshots. You don't have to install it, but if you could give us an overview of what the tool does, maybe some screenshots that you can find those on the web or on a tutorial. Help us understand how it helps accomplish the goals of chapters 9 and 10. So that being automating environments for developers and automating testing. Those are the DevOps goals that we're trying to focus on, and how we can use tools, industry tools, to be able to achieve those things. So you guys have 10 minutes left to talk in your groups. Not as much as I promised. I'm sorry. Can we split them out?
Yep, done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want to assign me to one so I can go just kind of check in, make sure they're understanding?
Sure. Is there any preference?
Nope.
Okay, I will send you to breakout room 1. If I can get it to cooperate. There we go. Hey, Zibia. There she goes.
Hi, Brother Miller.
Hi.
My group is the second one, and we're thinking about using automated operating system configuration tools.
That would be great, Nancy. Operating system configuration tools. Do you have, and do you have a certain one that you wanted to choose?
I think we're just going to split them because we're like 5.
Oh, you can all do the same one if you'd like. So
okay. We didn't talk about that part.
it's up to you. I mean, if you guys wanted to, it's might be a little bit hard to.
It seems like your team wanted to do their own each one, didn't it?
Okay.
Nancy?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking.
Okay. If you feel like you can,
I can ask them and just make sure.
Go ahead. If any of you want to combine to cover one together, that would be good.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking.
So you can go. Okay. Okay.
Okay, how do I go back to my room?
Click on breakout rooms at the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
If I'm not a co-host, I can't freely jump between them.